Hey, all you SurfPrep users out there, or for those of you who are maybe considering the SurfPrep sanding system. We're going to focus this next little clip here on a lean sanding environment when a vacuum comes into play along with central vacuum sanders. One of the biggest things I've run into over the last, I'm going to say 8 to 10 months, and approximately if I'm guessing right, we've moved about 60 of these units across North America. And what we have found, what we've discovered, is that when one of the SurfPrep sanding systems gets placed into a shop, if somebody doesn't route all of the air lines, the electric cords, and the exhaust hoses up above and off the floor, we'll get a call back. I get a call back in about a day or two where people are frustrated because they elected to go with all of that stuff on the floor, meaning the vacuum hoses, the electric cords, and the air lines. There's a problem with that. Number one, it's a big OSHA deal. You've got operators, you've got rolling carts, you've got different equipment in and around your sanding areas, and it's very difficult to manage 1 inch thick exhaust hoses, air lines, and electric cords. If you can pan down just a little bit, you'll see that we're kind of replicating here in the lab. We're replicating a typical sanding environment. You'll have a tabletop sanding area, whether it is a downdraft table or just tables in general. You'll have a table area, and then you might have a sanding area back against the wall. This is quite typical, where people are sanding here and they'll be sanding on a table. Another thing is that you might have a finishing environment where you have a tow line, where furniture pieces, end tables, whatever, dressers, different parts, doors, drawers, or something, they're laying on a tow line where all the product is being rolled along a line. We, in those environments, also, we want to keep all of the hoses and everything up off the floor for the reasons that we already discussed. So what we're going to go through today is we've had lots of inquiries on, well, what do I do? How do I do this? What diameter hose do I use? What's the longest length I can run so that I'm still effective and I'm able to use my SurfPrep vacuum? The SurfPrep vacuum is an 11 amp motor, and it comes packaged the way that it does, set up for a 20 amp breaker. What we do is, because of certification and everything, in order to be able to sell this and meet all the requirements for certification, I suggest that if you first don't have a 20 amp outlet, maybe get one. Hardwire that into your wall or some area and get it so that you can plug this in. The reason that is this 11 amp motor, it's going to draw 11 amps, and if you plug that into a 15 amp breaker, you're not going to throw that breaker. When you introduce the electric SurfPrep sander, the 3x4, the 5 inch, each of these guys at 350 watts is going to pull 3 amps. So if you're good with math and you calculated that in your head real quick, we're looking at right at that maximum capacity. If we've got 2 sanders, electric sanders going at the same time, and the motor, we're at, let's see, 11 and 3 and 3, that's 6. So we're at 16 amps or thereabouts. We've been we had no problems. We've been able to take an adapter like this, and this is a 15 amp conversion plug that takes the 20 amp plug here. We plug it into here, and then we have the 15 amp, the standard wall socket, where we can stick this into a 15 amp, just a standard wall socket. And we can run. We don't throw the breaker. One of the things that you will find is that if you try to plug our system into a ground fault interrupter, say near a sink in a kitchen or a bathroom, there's a very good chance that you're going to throw that GFI with the current we're pulling and the amperage that the draw on that. Getting back to the system, I want to go through kind of coming off the vacuum. I want to go through the different parts so that you have an understanding of the parts and how we set this all up. We have two Y adapters, okay? You'll notice that this one's got a longer neck on it here, and this has got a much shorter neck. This is the Y adapter, and you'll be able to see on the bottom of the screen the actual item number when we show you these different parts. This is the one we want to run if we're running a 2-operator setup off the bucket, okay? If we're going to run a 2-operator system off the bucket, we'll use this here. But this here limits us because now when we have our hoses coming off either side of this, they're on the ground. And we don't want to do that. We want to get all the hoses up off the ground like we discussed. This longer neck splitter, this one is always going to go up above. It's going to go up above, and I'll show you that. I'll share with you that flow. Coming off the bucket, we've had a lot of people say, man, how far away from the bucket can I sand? What's the furthest distance? We can sit the bucket in one corner of a finishing area or a sanding area, and we can have as much as 50 feet of hose, and we have no problems at all. The motor is powerful enough. It does a great job of pulling all the dust up through the sander, through the hoses, back to the body of the tool. How we do that and what we recommend is coming off the bucket, you use this sleeve adapter. This is the 1.5-inch sleeve right here, metal sleeve, to a 1.5-inch female thread. We're going to take our 1.5-inch static conductive, not anti-static, but static conductive hose, and we're going to thread this fitting right onto the hose. It always throws me off because it's a reverse thread. So you just screw that right into the back end of the hose here, and then you're going to take this and you're going to plug it right into here, into the body of the sander like I have here. So that 1.5-inch sleeve with the hose screwed into it, you're going to plug it right into there. It's a press fit and it goes right into that hole. Here's my 1.5-inch hose. My exhaust hose, if you'll notice, we're kind of simulating this being up against the wall, and we run the hose up the wall, and at the very top here, I'll use my pointer. This is all I could find in the warehouse. We take and put our hose up at the top of this like channel bar. This channel bar you can get at any hardware store. I got some roller bearing hooks where I have zip locked the exhaust hose along with my electric cord and my air line to these hooks up here. These hooks, they travel, they'll kind of slide. So we run that whole combination of those three things all together, and then we'll come over here to the end, and then we come to a compression sleeve that is a 1.5-inch thread to a 1.5-inch compression. So what this means is this piece slides over the metal neck of this sleeve. So you slide this over this sleeve, and that female thread then screws back into the other end of the hose that's sitting up there. So you've got the 1.5-inch hose, then you have a 1.5-inch female thread to a 1.5-inch cuff that slides right over this Y adapter. Now on the Y adapter, what we do is we'll take here, you'll see there's another cuff right here. This cuff is a 1.5-inch cuff to a 1-inch thread. So we take the 1.5 inch cuff and we slide this on the Y here. And then you'll notice our 1 inch hose, because we now have a 1 inch hose, we're stepping down from 1.5 to 1 inch, and then we simply thread the 1 inch hose into this 1 inch female. That's how you split down from 1.5 inches to 1 inch. The longest run, so let's say we do a 50-foot run. Ultimately or optimally, what we want to do is run 1.5 inch hose. We want the thicker or larger diameter hose. You can see the difference. We want the longest run of hose to be 1.5 inches, because we then have the ability, the volume, to draw all that material back to the vacuum. Where we step down from the 1.5 inches is at this Y. In this case here, we step it down to the inch and we run our inch hose. In this case here, I've got about 5 feet of hose from the end of this cuff to here. Right here, this distance is about 5 feet. Now, there's a reason I do that. I want to then add in this flexible exhaust hose. You can tell the difference in the rigidity of this hose here. It's much more rigid, not as flexible. If I'm sanding, I don't want this rigid 1 inch hose going into the back of my tool. I want this noodle hose. That noodle hose gives me a lot of freedom while I'm sanding, and it allows me to stay flat on my substrate because of that flexibility, along with the ball swivel air hose. So this ball swivel air line moves and flexes as I move, and it allows me that freedom. This flexible hose is wire reinforced. The way that we connect this noodle whip hose to our more rigid hose, but the way that we connect these two together is with a 1-to-1 swivel. So we have a 1-to-1 swivel to where this thing moves and it rotates. It gives you the flexibility when you're connecting your 1 inch rigid to your 1 inch noodle. Once we get our noodle whip hose, we usually do 2-foot sections of this, okay? Once we get that coming off that 1-to-1 coupler there, we simply reverse thread it into the back end of our swivel on the SurfPrep air or electric tool, the electric sander. I just disconnected it. I put it in here and I reverse screw this, and our exhaust hose is securely screwed into the back of the tool. That shows you how we go from 1.5 inches down to 1 inch on the rigid hose. The 1.5 inch hose is rigid. We couple the rigid 1 inch to the highly flexible noodle whip. That's how we get to the sander. On the 3x4 electric, same exact thing. The only difference is we have an electric cord instead of an air line. So our electric cord just follows. We have these clamps that clamps the electric cord onto the exhaust. And you'll notice that on the sander, my sander, the cord is only 12 feet long. So we go up, around, we're hooked in, and you'll notice here, I have an extension cord. So my extension cord right here connects to the end of the electrical cord on the sander, and the extension cord follows, goes around all the way down, and I plug into right here on the vacuum. So I got my electric sander plugged in here. I got my air sander plugged in here. I am now able to operate both tools. So this gives us the ability to have a free space, an area that's not cluttered with air lines, electric cords, and all that kind of stuff. What I'd like to do now is show you how we move between a standalone sanding station, and then we can turn around and go to the back and sand back here. And I'm going to do that just real quick with this door. We'll sand with the 3x4. The other thing, I'm not sure if I mentioned this a minute ago, your tools always fall off your workbenches, your sanding areas. If I'm busy, no one intentionally does this, but if the tool is here and I'm busy and an air hose is here and I've got to grab something or someone calls me, I go like this, my tool then isn't falling on the ground. My tool's not banging and hitting the concrete. That's why I make sure my connection, my distance on my length on my 1-inch rigid hose from that Y up above, I make sure that it's the proper distance so that the hose and everything catches the tool so it doesn't land on the ground. The tools are industrial graded. They're incredible. They can take a beating, but I always take care of my stuff, and I want to make sure if I'm taking care of my stuff, it's going to take care of me. So now we're going to turn on our 3x4 electric, and I just want to be able to kind of simulate how we're going to move from an island or a row of tables or a tow line with our sanding, and how we're going to move back to a countertop or another sanding area. So my vacuum's on, I'm sanding, there's no dust at all. You notice my hose is free to travel. I'm not fighting the exhaust hose and my air line and my electric cord. Everything is free to move and travel around. I can hold this up a little bit just to keep it out of the way. I've got the ability to move my parts, and I'm sanding. So when I'm done here, if I've got parts behind me and these parts are on this counter back here, all I'm going to do is grab my sander, take this, come over here, and I'm going to sand. Again, all of the air line, the exhaust hose, nothing's on the ground, and we're sanding real easy, simple. I'm not fighting with a hose, and I'm getting my work done. That is an ideal situation to be in. Anytime you can have all of your tools with central vacuum, all the hoses and everything up off the ground, you have the ability to travel. I could take this tool, this little square tubing, I can pull this with me on that bearing, and I can come out to here, and you can see how that travels. That gives me another 6 to 7 feet, additional feet, to be able to move the sander and reach a lot of different areas. That pretty much sums up what I wanted to share. We've had questions the last 6 months where people have been asking, hey, if I get the sanding system, if you have another vacuum, a DIY type of vacuum, we have all of the parts to be able to connect that 2 1/4 inch hose to adapter parts that we have, and we can step those down to a 1-inch hose. But we've been asked the last 6 months, what's the best way to set up a sanding area so I don't have all this stuff all over the floor in and around my feet? Hope this helps. If any of you have any questions whatsoever, feel free. All the parts are on SurfPrepSanding.com. Feel free to give any of us a call, and we'll help you through all the different steps that it'll take to get you set up. We hope that we can make it simple, easy, and quick so that you make sanding fun.